Hello, my name is Nic Easley, CEO of 3C Consulting, and today we're going to be talking about extraction. Now there's many parts of extraction, and first let's get our nomenclature correct. Some people call it processing, some call it extraction, some call it manufacturing, some seats even call it infusion. But when you're taking the plant material, extracting certain oils, formulating those into products, and making gummies, edibles, vape cartridges, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, as many commercial extractors have started to scale up their operations, I've seen places that with 1,800 square feet were doing $54 million in revenue a year. So it's not about how big it is, it's how efficient you use the space. And a big thing to really understand here early on, there's very different methodologies of extraction. From water, this great universal solvent that we have, to solventless extraction, rosin presses using heat and pressure, creating live resins. Also hydrocarbon extraction, propane, hexane, butane, even getting into like more volatile extractions with ethanol or non-volatile extractions with CO2 using pressurized gases. So if you're applying for new licensure, something to really understand is there's a big difference in applying for licenses for volatile or non-volatile extraction. To really design your extraction operations, you need to understand what sort of solvents you're going to be using. What sort of clarifications? Are you making isolates or distillates? Are you using lipid-based extractions? Now, anytime you're doing cultivation, you move forward into commercial extraction. With commercial extraction, everything that you do and touch needs to be food grade. So having a commercial kitchen, having grease traps, having everything approved for like OSHA facilities for your workers to be creating food grade products. Everything that you're making from when you're extracting the oils to making the brownies, to packaging those brownies needs to be done with a food grade mindset. And many of the problems that happen with these commercial extractors are they don't have a standard or steady supply of raw plant material, RPM, raw plant material, or some people call it trim. So when you have the big cannabis flowers, anything that's being cut off with machines or by hand, or the smaller buds, that's typically what's used to make extracted products. Now, a lot of extractors don't realize that you really need to hone in on what SKUs you're using and how many SKUs you're making. Some companies, they'll have 20 different types of chocolate bars, 20 types of edibles, all of these different tinctures and ethanols or sublingual strips and making suppositories. Now, in the United States, we get away with making products that internationally we're not able to do at this time because they're not standardized drug products. And compounded products like a vaporizer or a transdermal patch, those would need to be compounded in a pharmacy. Compared to in the United States, an extractor or an infuser is able to actually make these sorts of products. So when you're planning out your extraction operations, the big ticket items, your large extraction instruments, the clarifiers, the purifications, the separators, the millers, these things get pricey. Back in the day, some bubble bags, you could make bubble hash pretty easily just by hanging up some bags and filtering out plant material through that. But it's gotten much, much more sophisticated over the years, and that's really where the cannabis extraction landscape's going. A piece of math, I'm not sure if you guys are used to math, but to put something into perspective here, if I'm making 1 gram of, let's say, hash, and that is 50% THC, I've got 500 available milligrams in that product. Now, if I'm making adult use edibles that have 10 milligrams per serving, I can make 50 servings from 1 gram of hash. Now, that 1 gram you might sell at wholesale for 20, 30, 40 bucks. But if you're making 50, let's say, truffles or chocolate bars that have 10 milligrams each, if you're doing $5 margin on each of that, 5 times 50, $250 of revenue from that 1 gram versus selling that for, let's say, $20, $30. So really, milligrams are a lot smaller and go a lot farther when it comes to edibles or infused kind of topical products than grams of hashes. And this is where the multiples and the multipliers really get big when it comes to creating additional margin. So some companies, they try to just make all these different products. I'd really invite you to think about how can you specialize on certain products that are going to get your brand recognized and have standardized, consistent, reliable products that are consistently available in the dispensary. There's nothing worse than making a good product, having people try it, buy it, and come back to the store and not be able to get this. So before you launch your lines, making sure to have enough back stockpiled that can actually satiate that client and consumer demand as it's scaling forward. But when you're thinking about those products, really look at some of the data categories like BDS analytics, cannabis benchmarks, headset. What products are selling? Just because you like a product, a dill pickle, cannabis infused pickled like potato chip, that sounds delicious to me, but might not sound delicious to a lot of people. What are the product categories that are selling when it comes to edibles and beverages or topicals? Or how if you're doing one methodology of extraction, let's say with ethanol, a class 1 div 1 explosion proof standard volatile extract, solvent, how could you potentially during that process take out some and make tinctures and then refine that down into distillates that could then be formulated into other products? Being able to make multiple revenue streams from the same solvent and methodology can really help you to scale your operations and reduce costs and make more types of products that people are going to want. Now, one thing I don't like doing is ever with an operation selling bulk concentrates. If you're selling bulk concentrates to other producers to make their products, you could have been making those same products. The real value in cannabis is soil to oil. Being able to really own that supply chain, have steady, consistent, reliable plant material available to make standardized bulk oils. From those oils, being able to make vaporizer cartridges or beverages or edibles or topicals is really going to set you up for success in being able to take more market share. Now, early on, it's challenging because you might get some plant material that's high quality, some that's low quality, but really take the time to research who are some of the better operators, who are some of the producers that are going to be more consistent and reliable. How could you potentially pre-purchase some of the materials or products so that you can guarantee that you have enough supply of plant material to go through that operation? Now, something that's caused a lot of problems with commercial extractors in the past has been when there hasn't been enough testing or standardization of their methodologies. Before you just start blowing things out and making chocolate bars, make sure that they're consistent. Budget out more for your R&D, for your research and development budget, for the analytical labs that are going to help test those chocolate bars and make sure that you have standardized formulas and recipes for the products that you're making. Before you really launch things and start marketing, make sure you have a product that's worth marketing. Do some trials, do some testing, and make sure that you can consistently make those products over and over again. And some of the things, even though companies like Incredibles and others were having Fruity Pebbles, or you look at like Chiba Chews that were melting down Tootsie Rolls back in the day, they've really expanded their product lines, the same as companies like Wana or Coda or Kiva. Look at what other companies have been doing successfully, and how can you emulate or do certain things that have helped to attribute to some of their successes. Now, as you're growing your operation, one of the big problems as well is mixing batches. Really having a firm grasp on what batches made what products, and always having a goal for a recall control policy. If there were to be a recall, how can you trace that all the way back to the batch, the harvest batches, the producers, and really kind of isolate that problem? And getting ahead of that, doing plenty of pre-testing of the raw plant material, of the distillates, and of the value-added products that you're using. There's an example I had of a Colorado client that 6 years ago, they had plant material that was testing fine. Their isolates, once they made the oils, were testing fine. But once they made that into like their brownies, it wasn't testing clear anymore. It was having certain pesticides and residual solvents that were triggering failures on those processes. And what happened was they were buying some cheap flours, non-organic corn syrups that had lots of pesticides in them from traditional agriculture. Cannabis testing is much more sophisticated, diligent, and down to parts per billion. Itty bitty. So some of those things, azadirachtin, for example, might have been in the wheat or the corn that was made for those corn syrups that then triggers a failure. So the end products that they were making were not passing pesticide tests, but the plant material for cannabis was clean, the oils they were making were clean, it just wasn't those end products. So there's many types of extraction, many types of methodologies, but really doing your homework. What equipment is going to save you and create a lot of efficiency? Most processing facilities have 2 shifts of workers that are preparing, cleaning, manufacturing, and making really specific timelines for when they make sorts of products. But if you're just thinking, I'm going to blow some hash, there's some really bad stigmas when it comes to butane right now. And butane, absolutely fine solvent if you know what the fuck you're doing. But if you're just coming from the illicit market and having those tubes that you put plant material through and blow butane, those have been the hash oil explosions that really give cannabis extractors a bad name. So make sure if you're going to be doing volatile extraction or using mixed hydrocarbon extraction, you get ahead of that with the local municipality, understanding the fire codes, understanding the license and the safe storage protocols needed to be able to actually use those more volatile solvents. Because the worst thing you can do is start a company and be using these volatile solvents, have your license stripped away, and not pass fire inspections. Easily 10-20% of volatile extractors run into massive problems when it comes to their fire planning, their spark-proof facilities. And whenever you get into spark-proof, Class 1, Div 1 explosion-proof standards, it's pricey. So make sure to really spend a lot of time in your pre-construction planning to think how are you going to make these products safely and efficiently and be able to scale that operation as your demand for your product starts to grow. So there's millions of ways of doing extraction. And as you're planning out your operation, understanding what methodology of extraction you're going to be using. If you're going to do a non-volatile approach, it's going to be much easier when it comes to fire codes and pre-construction planning. But before you get too deep, once you win a license, or even if you're applying for a license, work with some experts that are going to help you understand what's first going to get you through licensing easiest. And then also, having like one master extractor or one extraction engineer, you're going to get yourself into problems. Just the same thing with master growers in the industry. Like one set of opinions. You never want to have one person's ideas control and pretty much dictate everything that you're going to do in your operations. Have some different experts look at your plan. When you're doing out your equipment specifications, have different companies give you bids. If you're doing CO2 extraction, talk with Eden, talk with Apex, talk with a variety of other extractors, and understand this is botanical extraction we're talking about. Cannabis, an extremely medicinal, magical plant, but it's still an agricultural commodity that's being extracted with botanical extraction methodology that's been around for hundreds of years. When you think about tincturing or some of these solvents, it's been done forever. So don't think that this is something new and you're going in on this alone. But the big kind of pitfall problems that happen is when they're planning out the operation, they'll have some experience using one piece of equipment. But that one piece of equipment has to be part of a process manufacturing line, from milling, processing, weighing, distributing that, doing the extraction, using vacuum purge ovens and purification, all the way down to the types of equipment that you're using for filling vape cartridges. The more that you can create automation and customization of that operation for specifically what it is that you're doing and standardizing that, not just writing some SOPs and putting them on the shelf, but what are your daily checklists? What equipment needs to be cleaned daily? Replacement parts that have a replacement schedule so that you're not going through and blow some O-ring or lose some pump and then close down operations for 2 to 3 weeks, waiting for a new piece of equipment to come up. But there's a lot of opinions, a lot of methods of extraction, and a lot of ego that comes into it. The grand debate of, volatile extraction versus non-volatile extraction. Butane's the best solvent, makes like the best purest shatter. Not all people are dabbing. I myself, I love to smoke a good joint. I'm not somebody who owns a dab rig. It looks like you're smoking crack to me, but a lot of people like it. And if you can do it safely and provide a good consumer experience, why not provide that? But it's not just shatters, it's not just butters, it's not just waxes, it's not just live resins or keef. There's lots of different products that you can be making from similar methodologies of extraction. What is it that people are buying? How can you actually create those sorts of products and not spend $150,000 to make one specific product line just because somebody in your operation loves to blow wax or to use dabs? It's a growing category, but it's going to be getting much and much more complicated and sophisticated to do as the regulations really start to get more honed in and make this harder for operators to operate. And there's a big difference when it comes to United States kind of domestic extraction processes and international. Anytime you're working on anything international from the plant side, it should be done GAP, GACP, but always with the GMP processes in mind. Also certain ISO processes, but ISO specifications, that's on the process, not on the product. So really make sure you understand, how can I get my process certified and my products certified? And that's going to come through rigorous inspections of documentation, audits on the facilities, and keep these things third-party and independent verified. It costs time, it costs money, but it's worth doing when you can have a standardized certified product that can actually be allowed into markets. If you're a Colombian producer that's doing extraction, really understanding what's the difference in psychoactive and non-psychoactive. This is a huge problem. Many extractors think, well, if I have a non-psychoactive license, I can do CBD, it's hemp, I can sell that anywhere. Not true. If it's a medical cannabis license for non-psychoactive products, that means that everything you're producing is still a cannabis product, a medical cannabis product. And you're gonna have to follow all of those same protocols from the UN, from the WHO, or from the International Narcotics Control Board. The long-term play for growing high-quality oils and producing those in a low-cost market, low-cost jurisdiction at a high standard to be able to import them to those target off-take markets, that's where you're gonna make a ton of money, but it's super expensive to get into that. Doing a GMP processing facility, you might be spending $5 million. It can get pretty expensive pretty quickly. So what sorts of revenues, what sorts of offtake agreements can you get? Not just some contracts to win a license and I'm going to sell to Germany, I'm going to sell to all these other places, but really understand what's the current landscape, what's the difference between the products you can make in the US or the products you can make internationally, and not falling into the pitfall of thinking you're going to be a big Colombian or Peruvian or Brazilian operation and then selling products into the United States and those being sold in dispensaries. I talk with groups, it seems like every week, doing large-scale international products that don't understand the types of extraction methodologies allowed, or how that's going to play into a larger international drug development, drug discovery, pharmaceutical products manufacturing. It's not just blowing waxes, it's not just making hashes. The squirrels agree with me. It's all about the standardization of those products and knowing which genetics are standardized, how those come into standardized products, and how to make bulk API, active pharmaceutical ingredients, that can then be formulated or constituted in pharmacies or by governments with those sorts of licenses. But if you take the United States mentality of extraction and apply that to international extraction projects, you'll get burned each and every time. It's a different landscape, a different world, and long-term, with decriminalization, legalization, rescheduling, descheduling, that's really the play that you want to be looking at if you're doing large-scale international extraction. Or whereas the United States is going to federally legalize, how can you be in a jurisdiction that's going to give you bulk access to that plant material, allow you to manufacture products and potentially ship those, across interstate lines? But it's going to be where you're producing, what the cost is, what those local taxes are, and what unique advantage of a product or a water-soluble this or a specific type of thing that you can protect the intellectual property on that's going to give you a strategic leg up in the extraction game. And like I said, don't let ego allow you to dictate your decisions. Just because one person has experience blowing hash or making bubble hash this way, you need to own and dictate the control of your company and allow it to grow and scale and change as consumer demands and spending patterns change. But there's no one way to do this right. There's many methodologies, many solvents that can work, but really cater something that's going to work for you in your state with your operations. If you're applying for licensure, you're always going to be highly scrutinized if you're using volatile products, volatile solvents, and specifically butane, propane, hexane. Now, there's a solvent I love called dimethyl ether, DME, but that's extremely boom, extremely volatile, and trying to get that through regulators, it's going to take a lot of education. So you have to take that kind of strategic brand ambassador voice with many of these municipalities and states and help them explain this and understand that this isn't just butane. This isn't just blowing some butane through some tubes, whipping some things on a hot plate, and then selling different types of hashes. Some of these hashes are extremely strong, making sure that you have no residual solvents left in those end products, and very specific testing that's done on these. Have plenty of third-party independent labs do your testing, not just to shop out who's going to give you the highest THC kind of test results, but to make sure that you're holding those labs accountable as well, that you know what products you're making, that they're safe, you've got your certificate of analysis, and you can really capture a bunch of market share moving forward. But if you've got questions on how to make different products or how to do a variety of different product lines through the same manufacturing facility, feel free to give us a call, reach out. There's lots of experts out there, and it's the experts that are going to help you to cater this facility for your specific needs, because retail is just retail. Having a dispensary, you're just buying something wholesale, selling it retail. Cultivation, if you're just growing plant material, Think about farmers commercially. 3 cents on the dollar goes to corn farmers. So you don't want to get stuck in that boat. And this is really the part for making manufactured products and bulk distillates that allows you the biggest margin, the biggest upside potential. And long term, it's not going to be like, yo, I want some OG Kush, or I want some space cookies, or some Durban Poison, or some sour diesel. It's the standardized brands, the beverages, the consistent experience. People aren't buying your products. They're buying the experience that they're going to get from using those products. And it's a lot easier to do that in a formulated, monitored dose of a 10 milligram or 100 milligram beverage, or a specific sort of vape cartridge or an edible that can allow those drug compounds and these cannabinoids to quickly enter the body. There's lots of ways to get these medicines into the body. If you can standardize a specific drug delivery system that's going to do this in a standard, consistent way, those are the experiences that people are going to be coming back to you for your products for years. Pepsi, Coca-Cola, these other sorts of products, it's not the raw products of like the corn syrup or the cane sugar that's going into those that's really getting the market share. It's building brands. And when you're building an extraction facility, manufacturing, infusion, products manufacturing, and laboratory, you gotta remember you're building a brand, and that's where brand continuity, brand consistency, and reliability is gonna set you apart from your competitors. Anyone can make a chocolate bar. What's different about your chocolate bar? The experience that it's gonna have, or the consistent, every time I eat this piece, I know how it's gonna make me feel. Just like if I buy a 6-pack of IPAs, I know what that's gonna make me feel like compared to like buying a bottle of cheap vodka and sitting down by the river eating government cheese in a van. Like, the experience is what people are gonna be wanting, that they're gonna be buying, and that's gonna set you apart and allow you to make an extraction company that's gonna scale and facilitate consumer demands in your market and future other markets. Once again, my name's Nic Easley, CEO of 3C Consulting. I've worked with over 1,000 clients in over 30 states and 32 countries, and anything you need, we're here for you. This pandemic has changed things, especially for manufacturers that didn't understand their supply chain, where certain solvents were coming from, and many of these extraction equipment and devices, these instruments are being manufactured in China and India. When China and India exports are really slowing down and you don't have other products or other avenues to get your packaging or to get your materials, that slows everything down. Make sure you understand every piece of equipment you use. What are the replacement parts? All of the things you need from your sugar, your corn syrups, your food processes. And remember, everything you're making is a food product for your sick grandma, your sick mom. Don't sell garbage to people. And remember, if you're making a product, you've got one chance to really influence how they want that product, the type of experience that they're going to be getting from that product. You have a huge responsibility, not just an opportunity in doing this. But understand your operation, have at least 3 or 4 options for every piece of equipment you might need or a replacement part. And now's the time that having a little bit of extra inventory on hand isn't gonna kill you. Inventory can normally kill companies, but getting things at better wholesale prices, making sure you have what you need, and that way if there is some sort of supply distribution or supply interruptions, you're covered. Who you used to think was your competitors might actually be people that you could start to work with. And if you're making 200 SKUs, maybe limiting that down, talking with some of your competitors, working with similar distribution companies to get those products to market, and being willing to, when necessary, to pay for shelf space in some of these dispensaries, because without the marketing, without the branding of your brand and your products, you could have the best products in the world, but if no one knows who you are, what you do, why you do it, and what makes you unique and why your product is so good, they're never gonna buy your products. But make sure it's consistency. That's what's killed brands in Colorado and multiple states. They make things differently, they try different lines, really have those tested, understand what you're making, and how can you make the most volume of those at the cheapest price, and often that's gonna come through larger wholesale purchasing. Once again, my name's Nic Easley. This has been Cannabis Unfiltered, wishing you all a great, beautiful day.